Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, no matter where you are, folks. I am so pleased that you took time out of your schedule to join us today. How have you been? My name's Daryl. I'm with VanillaSoft. You're at the right place if you thought you were going to come to a webinar on how to not get hung up on your phone call fears. I mean, I got to ask that question straight out of the gate. How many of you saw that title and it just kind of hits you, right here? Like, oh, I feel that. I know it. I have that fear. My heart races. I get anxious. I get sweaty. I get nervous. It's scary. So why are we having this conversation? Well, you may not be aware because you probably haven't been to the stores lately or turned on the radio or turned on television or what have you. But apparently there's this little holiday coming up called Halloween. And Halloween is a bit of a frightful place. And we thought we should deal with the fear factor for this show. This is where I would insert an evil laugh, but I'm just not feeling it today because it's not quite there. 2 more days and it's Halloween. My wife, my kids think I should go out as myself for the trick-or-treating, but what do they know? That's just kind of stupid. Let's get this show on the road. My job here today is I brought together 2 incredible women. I'm going to introduce you to them shortly. And they're going to share some real life stories and some wisdom and some lessons learned. And they're going to, if we do this right, you're going to feel a little better. You're going to have some tools in your bag that you can use to overcome any fear you may have. So whether this is for you, or perhaps you're a sales leader and you've got people on your team who are experiencing this, or you're onboarding them, and this is something comes up quite often. How do I overcome that fear? I know the phone, it's not, shall we say, as comfortable to those of us who have been in the business for decades versus those who are coming into the business today for the first time, because we like to text and we like to email and we like to do social, but the phone's a little weird. So there's a lot of reasons why you might have fear. No one's judging today. It's all about helping. So let's get this show on the road. As we go to our next slide and cover our ground rules, one of the things you need to understand is that everybody's in listen-only mode. It's the classic webinar format, but we are taking questions. Cool, eh? So all you got to do is on the screen in front of you, there's little chat windows. You get the video viewer you're watching me on right now, and probably to the right of that, there's a little chat window. So just type your questions in there. You don't need to sign up for an account. They may prompt you for that. You can just go in as a guest. You can personalize your name. But if you do sign up for an account and you come back for future VanillaSoft webinars, it'll always remember who you are, assuming you don't clear your cookies, of course. So do that, and any questions you send us that way, we're going to try to incorporate and ask them on the fly. If we don't ask them during the live conversation, we will respond in the text chat regardless. So either way, you're going to get an answer from us. So that's kind of cool. The other thing is, if you like today's conversation, you're thinking, I wish I had a copy of these slides or had a copy of the presentation. I want to hear what, guest number 1 or guest number 2 had to say, because it was prolific, it was profound, it was incredible, it was life-changing. Not to worry, we're going to send you a copy of this to the email you use to sign up for within about the next 24 hours or so. If for whatever reason you don't get that, not to worry. Just go to the VanillaSoft.com website, and under the resources, under webinars, you can find this webinar, as well as just a ton of other pieces of content from the industry's brightest, most amazing, most talented individuals around issues that you deal with every single day. I did promise you to meet my panelists, 2 amazing women. Let's meet them now as we bring them on up. First one up is Deb Calvert. Now, I'm assuming you know Deb. And you have to understand, now, Deb she's humble. She said it just best. Before we went live, we were having a conversation, and she said, I'm just Deb. So she won't be the one to boast about her accomplishments, but I will. So I have no problem doing that. Deb was named one of the 65 most influential women in business. She's consistently on lists of top sales influencers and thought leaders. She's worked as a leadership program architect, sales productivity specialist, a researcher for over 20 years. She has a rather unique mix of senior level sales, a little bit of HR, a little bit of operations, and that kind of gives her some pretty unique and valuable insights and an ability, candidly, to understand the challenges faced by companies, your company, and senior leaders, perhaps you or those within your firm. She is a top sales and leadership speaker for organizations and industry events. She's in demand. I'm excited. We are actually partnering with her this year on a wonderful format, which we will announce publicly soon. But with that, I'm going to stop right there. I'm going to stop gushing over Deb and simply say, Deb, Thank you for joining us. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Daryl. You know, I'm a fangirl of VanillaSoft and of you, so I'm really happy to be here.
Oh, you are so sweet. Now, Deb is one half of the equation. Let me introduce you to Fiona. I have a soft spot in my heart for Fiona. Fiona Tibble. She has a passionate background. She in understanding people, and I love the way she describes it. She says like it's through an anthropological lens. Now, I will fully admit I had to practice that word a few times to make sure I said it in its full correct. But she is a proven sales executive who loves to use her knowledge of human behavior to push forward and have success in the sales world. So that's kind of cool. She has a lot of experience at high level network building and management, sales, think tanks. She's also, which is why she's here today, on the front lines when it comes to cold calling at VanillaSoft. That's right. Fiona is one of our own, and we were so excited to get her on here. She is very creative in how she thinks. She's very capable when it comes to dealing with those challenges that happen in the moment, and she can totally get and relate to that fear of calling because she deals with it like everybody else does every single day. Fiona, thanks for taking time out of your schedule.
Thank you. Good to be here. Unlike Deb, you've bribed me with an hour line next week, I believe it is. But terms and conditions to be worked out now. I'm very happy to be here.
That's fantastic. Okay, so let's get into the actual conversation about what's going to be covered today. All right, straightforward stuff. These are some of the lines that we hear all the time, and we're going to address these lines and go into the root of the issue is. But tell me if you can relate to this. If you call and you finally manage to connect, you get a gatekeeper, and the gatekeeper doesn't put you through. What do? Do you panic? Do you know what to say? When they ask those hard questions, can I say who's calling? What's this about? Do you have an appointment? What do you do? I mean, what if that happens, right? We're going to cover that. Worse yet, anybody tell me if this happened to you? You call and you get that live person on the phone and you're not expecting them, right? You're like in, robot mode. You're dialing, da-ding, da-ding, da-ding. You're in the zone.
And all of a sudden you get a real live talking person there. And you're not expecting it. And all of a sudden, you just freeze. Your mouth and your head, they're not working. What do you say? What do you do? That's a real fear. It's not unlike stage fright. You get out there and you see the audience for the first time. You know your lines. You've done the rehearsals. But you finally see that real life audience and you just lock up. Or the classic, when should you start physically selling them? Of course, which you should never be selling them. You should have them build a solution. To do that, you need to do the discovery process to understand their issues. But the whole point is, of course, you're doing this ultimately to close the deal. So when's the right time to kind of segue from the pleasantries or the initial, hi, how are you, to into the actual purpose of your call? And then I love this last one because I get it. Man, do I get it. It's, what if you call and you get a hold of them and they're rude to you, they're abrupt with you, they hang up on you, they yell at you. Those are just a handful of the concerns that so many of us have. Get it, we're going to do it. So I guess I can go to our next slide here and put it this way. Nice, short, sweet, simple. Share it on the chat window. I'd love to have your conversations. What is your greatest phone call fear? What is it you, right now, type it out. What is it you personally is your greatest fear? Fiona, while they're doing that, I'm going to you. I'm going to ask you, what is your greatest phone call fear? Whether it's now or once upon a time, what is it?
I think it's always, and this underlines a lot of people's fears across the board, be it the hang up or the yelling that you've mentioned. I think it's that fear of rejection. At the end of the day, our bodies process rejection in the same way that we process physical pain. No one wants to put themselves through physical pain. So it's that fear, and you just hold back if you've got that. I think that's, for me, has always been my greatest fear. But there's ways around that and, aspects to it that what is the worst that could happen at the end of the day. But yeah, that's me. It's that rejection piece.
And you're not alone. I know I was one of the people I follow, a great guy, Benjamin Denny. We've had him on the show before. He talks about that. He actually says it's our parents' fault. Our parents raised us to physically be polite to people. You don't interrupt people. Every time when we were a kid, our mom's holding our hand and we go out and we meet strangers on the street or whatever, and the kid is acting up, and you're correcting. You don't do this. Or you can read the body language of the person your mother or your father is talking to, and you know they're not impressed with you, and you realize all of a sudden you've been centered out, or your parent disciplines you and centers you out. That's all that is rejection. Benjamin posits that rejection from that very young age is what makes us so difficult to cold call now, because we are doing everything that we were taught not to do. You don't interrupt. You don't make it about you. You don't anger somebody. You don't be disrespectful to their calendar or their needs. It's all your parents' fault. So, Fiona, it's not you. It's your parents, just so you know. Deb, let me ask you, on a personal note, because you've done a lot of this, whether, again, it's now or once upon a time, what is your greatest phone call fear?
Well, I think the fear of rejection is absolutely valid, no matter how much you've done, no matter how skilled you are. But you brought up another point there, Daryl, which I think is interesting. When I coach salespeople, here's what they more often say. They don't say, I'm afraid of being rejected. They more often say, I don't want to bother anybody. I know how busy they are. I don't want to seem like that pushy salesperson. So the stereotype and being boxed in, being thought of in that way, is also something that concerns people. And they're usually more willing to disclose that as a fear too.
Right. So they're projecting, if you will, excuses because they don't necessarily want to admit, or perhaps they don't even recognize that what they are actually doing is reacting to a visceral fear they have of that rejection.
Yeah. That call reluctance, it is real, and it is, I believe, it is physical. I didn't know that it was from the same center as physical pain, Fiona. That's a good takeaway for me to know. But I get it, because you physically can experience a lot of symptoms when you have cold call reluctance or outright fear.
It's true. Like I said when we started, there'll be anxiety, your upset stomach, you're nauseous, you're clammy, you're sweaty. There's lots of ways your body's telling you that this is a challenge. And we're going to help you through that today. In fact, let's go to the next slide. We have some interesting stats here, which is, this is to make you feel a little better. All right. So this is from a study that came out in 2018. So it's pretty recent. And in it, they studied a whole bunch of people about this very issue. What they learned was that more than half of salespeople, so 53%, give up too easily when they're cold calling, which is usually, that could be either they're lazy or they're just reading it wrong, but often it's that constant fear of, I'm interrupting that person again. I'm interrupting again. Okay, I've interrupted them 3 times. They're not answering. I'm not going to do this anymore. But even more prolific, I think, that's telling you is that 48%, so almost 1 in 2, let's just round and say 1 in 2 people are physically afraid to pick up the phone and make cold calls. So, Deb, let me ask you that. Do those stats, do they surprise you based on your experience and the organizations you've worked with yourself?
I might have thought the number was higher. So I wonder if that study is based on what people are actually willing to acknowledge. Fear takes many forms. I can see evidence of fear even when people aren't acknowledging that they're fearful. It's when you procrastinate and you spend a long time cleaning up the CRM, much more time than it really takes. Or you are researching to the nth degree every person before you call them, as opposed to doing some high level and using good time management. Or you take a mild rejection and cross them off the list forever because you never ever want to get even that mild rejection again. So I'm sort of surprised that the number's as low as it is.
It is. I don't know the nuance. We've got a link here too. You can check out yourself, folks. We'll share that link when we give you the update. But I am curious myself because there is a part of me that would have expected to be higher. I think you're onto something when you're saying that's just the percentage that was willing to admit it, or perhaps maybe they're not afraid of it now, but 5 years ago when they were doing it, maybe they were then, and so that they're through the context. But either way, even if we say this is a conservative number, this is 1 in 2. Fia, I'm going to ask you. So Deb was just talking about some of the things we do when we have these fears, whether that be taking extra time to do some research, really looking at the lists, or perhaps getting easily distracted by, what's on, the news or what have you. And, does this resonate with you? Or are you feeling a little chagrined as she says that because you can identify with that or not?
Absolutely. And particularly, as you said, when you start out in sales and cold calling for the first time, it's so daunting because it's that fear of interruption, and interruption is confrontational. And as humans, generally, not everyone, most of us want to avoid negative confrontation. And that, I think, coupled with the optimized culture that we live in, social media and social selling, what time do you post things? When should you post them? How often? There's all these tactics that come into play that we can then use as excuses. Well, now is not the best time to call them. Well, now is as good a time as any. But you do go through that process of trying to rationalize your irrational fear of cold calling and that procrastination. And I have certainly done that before.
I find it so interesting to hear you use the term interruption, because I've heard it used over and over again. I'll reference my friend Chris Beal. He's with Connect and Sell. And Chris talks about that you are the interruption. And his point when it comes to cold calling is that you actually have to embrace the fact that you're the interruption and acknowledge it with the person when they answer the phone. Because what you're doing ultimately is you're an interruption. They know you're an interruption. But the point they'll also say is they answered the phone. So even though you may be interrupting them, they could have not answered the phone, and they answered the phone. So by acknowledging it, and maybe asking for, as Chris would say, 27 seconds, or as Benjamin would say, 30 seconds, this is a cold call. I just need 27 seconds to tell you what we're about. I think it's going to really resonate with you. Can I have that? So right away, what you've done is you've acknowledged it, and you've actually quasi given them control, because most people will say, fine, I'll give you 30 seconds. Because remember, they answered the phone knowing they didn't know who you were. And fine, you can have it. Now, what's so important about that is when they give you that control, they feel that they themselves are in control, which is really important, because often what you're doing is you're having this dance on control. Now, as I share this with you, Deb, are you having any kind of reactions? Would you agree with Chris and Benjamin on that one, or would you actually have a very different point of view?
Yeah, Chris and I have talked about opening before, and clearly he's got the metrics that prove that is a solid way of coming at it. I have another suggestion. If there's anyone who wants to have more than one tool in their tool belt, I think that it's also valuable to insert a thank you very early in the call. Like, hi, this is Deb. Thank you for taking my call. I'm with. So before I ever talk about my credentials or my company, I'm going to thank you. And the reason I'm thanking you for a moment of your time is because I want to kick in the law of reciprocity. The law of reciprocity says if I give you something, you want to give me something in return. And all I'm asking for in exchange for this very minimal appreciation is your minimal attention, so that I can come back in there and express value to you and capture your attention. That's what I'm looking to do.
I did a podcast recently with Julie Shapiro of Octopost, social media platform. She's the head of sales. And she was referring to that very element you're talking about there as the human touch. That, you don't want to be this robot. You don't want to be this person who's looking. It's just about me and the transaction. You want to establish early on that human connection. And that simple little thank you, she spoke specifically to thanking them, goes a long ways to off-putting and, any kind of disruption that, interruption that you brought to their life. And their guard will drop, and they will open up, and they will feel valued and appreciated. So again, whether you're giving them control, you're recognizing, the interruption, you're actually, letting them know that you cherish their time as much as they cherish their time. Thank you. Goes a long ways, because in the end, we're both people.
Yes.
One of the things that's interesting here, a little stat here in front of me. This is not going to be earth-shattering, but I want people to understand cause and effect if you have that fear. Salespeople who are afraid of making cold calls have trouble hitting their quotas, are more stressed, and are likely making less money than their counterparts who don't share this phobia. And right about now, there's a bunch of people going, and that's why I'm on this webinar helping with this phobia. So just so you know, there is a consequence to that fear. So, Deb, you look like you wanted to say something there. Like, did that comment resonate with you?
Absolutely. No, I was laughing. Yes, they're here because they want some help with that. And part of it is going to be, how can you help yourself? So I think we
We beat
We
that
can
one
help.
up. So let's go to the next slide, because that's actually what we're talking about, which is, they would say in any kind of recovery group, where you're trying to deal with a fear you have, whether it be a fear of snakes or a fear of crowds or anything else. They said there's kind of two things you need to really understand. And by the way, I'm not an expert, so ladies, please jump in here. Part of it is to understand some of the root causes of why you have those fears. And of course, the second part there is to actually, directly tackle those fears, tackle your fears one-on by confronting them, so you can get through it. And cold calling is no different. So the question we have here is, why do we have these fears? And, you've both talked about fear of rejection. I want to say something a little differently. I think a big one isn't just a fear of rejection. I think it's fear of failure. I'll throw that in.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Any reaction to that? You're both nodding your head yes. Is that resonating personally or not? Anybody can answer.
Well, I think some people might equate the two. So being rejected is failing, or it feels like failing. I think especially, though, if you have a looming quota and there are expectations and people are counting on you, that every time you don't get through and really needed to get through to a decision maker and you needed to progress to advance the sale, yes, absolutely. So you get yourself off the hook by saying, well, I didn't do it, so I didn't fail, when ultimately, actually, you also made no effort to succeed. So it's a game we play mentally with ourselves.
You didn't do it, but you avoided it, so you don't have the victory that you were seeking. Fee, so you had the fear of rejection you mentioned. Are there other fears that you worry? So let's say they don't reject you, but and now you're into the conversation. But do you have a fear of what happens next? What if I get asked a question I don't know the answer to, etc.? Are there other fears that you're relating to?
Yeah, I think failure, rejection, and not knowing the answers, it boils down to the individual's sense of self and ego. And no one wants to, get shot down. No one wants to have their ego, affected by those interactions negatively. But I think the best thing to do is just go into it with core confidence in yourself and understanding, as you mentioned earlier, that we are just two humans trying to connect. And once you put yourself on a level playing field, I think, and embrace the idea that you might get rejected, embrace the idea that you might not know the answers to everything, and admit that, I think you can move forward more confidently in your answers and in your approach.
So some of the things I've heard people say, and I would love your ladies' reaction to this. Deb, you talked about it differently. They may not use the same terms about it being rejection. They might use other excuses. Some of the excuses I've heard share, which is indicative of these fears, which is, they probably already have a vendor that they're happy with, so I'm not going to interrupt them. Or they're probably just going to say, no, I'm not interested, so why am I going to waste my time? I've heard this one before. I don't want to do it because I have a connotation in my head of that cliche, stereotypical sales professional that is just so annoying and so grating. And I don't want to sound like a salesperson. I see Fee nodding her head to that one. Are you ever afraid, Fiona, of sounding like a salesperson?
Yeah, I think everyone kind of fears that stereotype, because we've all been there on the receiving end of those calls when we don't want to be interrupted, and it can take a lot of self-control to try and be as polite as possible if you want to get off the phone. Some people don't have that, but I think, and going back to that human aspect, I think if you can get your personality across a little bit, and the thanking piece, Deb, that you mentioned, making yourself more human and making them appreciate that, you're just doing a job at the end of the day, and they are on the receiving end of that. But trying to, convey that you are a real human being that would like your time, and if not, then that's absolutely fine, and we will move on. But it's not the be all and end all. And I think sounding like a salesperson can be scary, because we innately don't want to be sold to. We want to buy, but on our terms. And I think
that's powerful. We want to buy, but not but on our terms. Deb, let me throw a curve at you. How much of our fear is not based on a fear of the phone, but it's based on a feeling of inadequacy or lack of knowledge or preparedness? In other words, I don't know my script. I don't really understand the solution I'm selling to. I don't really understand the marketplace. Therefore, I don't want to talk to somebody in case I get actually asked questions. How much of our fear is based on lack of knowledge?
I think quite a bit, especially in some fields, tech sales, for example. There can be quite a bit of complexity to a product. And if you've never been an end user and you don't have that background or education, but here you are trying to open up that conversation with someone else who certainly has more knowledge than you do, probably has a title that's far up the org chart versus yours, many more years of experience. I get it. You can have that. But I think there's two things that come into play here. You mentioned a list, Daryl, of all kinds of rationalizations for why people won't call because they already have it or did it or don't want it. I think we have to remind ourselves that there are two roles. There's a selling role and a buying role, and it's the buyer's right to say no. We don't get to say no for the buyer, so we shouldn't even go there. And then the second thing is going back to the all-important confidence that Fiona has mentioned. It begs the question, where does confidence come from? And the misunderstanding that confidence comes from knowing your product inside out, I don't think that's accurate. It's why companies spend way too much time on product training and not enough time on issues like the one we're discussing today. But confidence doesn't come from knowing the product. Confidence doesn't come from something about you, so that inadequacy, you can have that and still be confident. What confidence comes from, in my opinion, is the intention to help. And if you know you can help somebody and they have a need that you can meet, and you strongly believe that you're able to do that, to open up the conversation and help them find the pathway to this help that they need, that for me is a wellspring of confidence.
So you're getting to something that I'm going to cover off here in a couple slides, but you brought it up, so let's talk about it now. No, this is awesome. What I'm really hearing you say, I would use a term called mindset, a frame of mind, and it's about your approach. Your point I heard you say was, if I know I have something that can make their life better, and if they don't want it, hey, that's fine. That's their choice. I'll go on to the next person that can do it. This is not. I am not being rejected. What they're rejecting is to pursue my solution. It's not me, it's the solution. It's the product, it's the service, it's whatever. That's their prerogative, and I don't judge them for it. So I'm going to go ask the next person if they want it, because I know I can make a difference in their life.
Absolutely. And that's all it is, nothing more. It's just business. It's not personal. They don't even know you. How could it possibly be personal?
So let me ask you a question. This is probably, Fiona, I want to ask you a question. This is probably a good time to segue on to our next slide. I want to actually share. I've asked both ladies today if they'd be willing to share some of their own personal cold calling stories. I don't know if they're horror stories or success stories. We're going to find out shortly. But you're in an interesting situation, Fiona, because here you are as a sales exec. So this is your profession. But right now, you work for VanillaSoft, and we sell to other sales leaders. Do you find for you it's an easier sell because you have an affinity, you can identify with your target prospect perhaps better than the average bear, as opposed to, in other words, if you were selling semiconductors, that might be very different than what you're selling now. But right now, you're a sales professional selling to other sales professionals. You understand their world, you understand their life, you understand their challenges, because those are your challenges. Do you find that makes it easier for you to physically be successful in your endeavor?
I think it kind of falls into two categories here. On the one hand, absolutely. We are more sensitive to each other. We've all been there. We've all done the calling. And most of the time, they are quite open to hearing about something that can help. And it's exactly this framing it as a solution and not taking it personally. I think the other hand is that salespeople can notoriously be a little ruthless. And some of the people certainly that I've spoken to before, they don't give a crap about you. And that can lead to some pretty demoralizing hang-up days where it's one after another. But it's not always the case. And I think specifically who I'm targeting for VanillaSoft is the slightly separate kind of vertical. So it's not as bad, but certainly from targeting the salespeople, there's one or two. They can either be more open to and helpful, or quite the opposite.
So, Deb, let me ask you that question. We haven't talked about this yet. The whole idea of what you're selling can make a dramatic difference in your success. Do you, or maybe have you in the past, reject jobs or opportunities because it's just not a solution or offering either you can get your head around or you just don't have faith in it and you've actually walked away from opportunities? Or have you made the mistake?
Yes.
I've done this. Yeah, okay, go ahead. I'll let you finish.
For me, it is actually more about the philosophy. My company is called People First Productivity Solutions, and that means something. When organizations come to me and they are not seen as being people first in their organizational culture, sometimes they gravitate to me because they think I have the magic solution that will help them to transform overnight. But if they don't have the true commitment to doing things that are engaging for employees and that are, decent for their employees, there's no magic that I can give them. So I do a pretty thorough discovery process that includes qualifying candidates based on the people that I'm going to work with, based on how do they actually see their own organization and what are they willing to truly change. And I have rejected coaching clients for the same reason. If you're not willing to do the work, I'm not the right person. I'm going to make you work, and that's not for everybody.
Fit is so important. I'm glad you're talking about that. I was at a networking event not too long ago, and we were talking on a related note about this, and it was kind of it was a closed door session. We were marketing people, but the same applies to salespeople. And the information being shared was, what if you're in a job and this culture, this situation, to your point, Deb, happens. And it's not, you're not comfortable with it, or it's preventing you from being successful, or it's affecting your self-confidence, or whatever it might be. And the response I shared, and they've got a lot of nods around the head from those of a more senior vintage, is all I'm going to say, was I said, in my younger years, I took jobs I shouldn't have taken, and I didn't ask the right questions going into it. I learned as I matured that the job, the product, the service, the culture needed to be a right fit with me, for me to be passionate, to do my job with the right energy and enthusiasm and commitment and dedication necessary to succeed. So I learned to say no to some opportunities, put myself in a position to succeed with other opportunities that are a much better fit. So sometimes I will suggest that your fear of cold calling or reaching out may not necessarily be a lack of skills. It may not be a lack of desire or mindset. It may just be just not a good fit for you. So something for you folks who are listening right now is Deb is nodding her head and smiling to say that, is that me? Fiona, let me go to you on the personal cold calling stories. Is there a story or two you can share about some of the challenges you've personally gone through that you sit back and you go, oi?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. We've all got those stories and those moments where you just want to know why this has been taken the way it has, or why they've reacted like that. But I'll start with a funny one. So this was a couple of weeks ago, and it was a prospect that I'd been targeting for a while, and finally get through to them. And as you said earlier, that moment of I've been dialing and oh my God, it's a human. Hello. I'm so excited. And get into my pitch, and this guy keeps interrupting, kind of in the middle of a sentence, and it feels very unnatural to be interrupted in that way. And I would kind of try and speak to whatever he had said and go back to where I was in the pitch. And this happened 3 or 4 times to the point where he just blurted out, "Are you a robot?" And I said, no, my name's Fiona. I am calling you from VanillaSoft from London. Maybe it's the accent. I don't know. And in the end, he did believe that I was not a recording. He actually said that if I was, he would have loved to buy the software because the robot sounded so good. I said, well, yes, that's because I'm a human. But it led to, and after we got over the kind of AI versus human debate, led to a really good conversation, and I think broke the ice in quite a funny way. And he apologized very much so at the end for trying to catch me out as a robot. And conversation was good, and it was overall happy that it happened, because it broke that ice and it made the conversation feel more natural and human, oddly enough, as he thought I was a robot.
So all your future calls, you're going to open up, "Hi, this is Fiona. I am not a robot. I am human." So I love that. But I can see that happening more and more, in all honesty. But that's kind of funny. And like your challenge was, how do you react to that? Because that's certainly not a question you get every day. Are you a robot? Wow. Deb, is there a story that you can recall about your cold calling, experiences that is worth sharing with our audience so they feel a little better?
This one's quite recent, and I'll share it. Yeah, this is very recent. It was, I suppose, not technically exactly a cold call, but I suspect a lot of listeners have this same situation. It was an inbound lead, somebody who was on the website and filled out a form. And when I can, I pick up the phone and call those folks right away while I'm still fresh in their mind and the products that they're looking at are whatever they're pursuing right then. So I did that. I called someone immediately after they submitted the form, and they were offended because this had happened to them before, and they feel spied on. And she was talking about Big Brother, and she was using terminology about, it feels like you're watching me, and very paranoid sounding. And I wanted to apologize. I wanted to back off. I wanted to tell her I feel the same way. And I suppressed all of that. I decided that was not going to be very useful. So I just listened to her, and I said things like, yeah, I know. Where else have you experienced this? And what did your company do that's anything like that? And pretty soon we were talking and laughing a little bit. And I said, well, let me ask you this. If I weren't calling you right away, when would have been a better time to call you? And she said, oh, no, you're good. It's what I'm working on right now. So in the end, it was fine, but it was just a matter of having to let her vent about that and not take it personally.
So again, it's how both of you did a really good job in those examples. You didn't take it personally. It might have thrown you for a curve, but you approached them as people. You let them vent, and you built a conversation and rapport and trust, as opposed to the panic moment. So did you have a moment there, Deb, where you would almost want to panic and say, I'm just doing my job, man. You fill the form out. Why are you freaking out on me? I mean, because that's what we're all thinking inside our head when this is going on, right?
More so I was empathizing with her because I could see how suddenly I did look like this Big Brother figure coming in and spying on her. And, I did feel badly that she saw me in that way. But I had to set all of that aside and have that other conversation.
And it goes back full circle that, you were the interruption. In both cases, you guys were the interruptions, and you had to get past the interruption. So that's true. All right, let's go on to the next slide, because this is the meat of the presentation today. People have come to this, not just because it's Halloween, we're talking about fears, in this case, the fear of cold calling. They want to know, what are some tips and tricks? What are some proven tactics that we can employ to overcome our phone call fears? And I've got a list here that have worked for me personally that I can share. But, why don't we start with you, Deb? We're just bouncing ideas here, folks. We're freestyling. Are there any tips or tricks that you can start with sharing that work or you've seen people employ to overcome phone call fear?
Yes. 3 different things come to mind right away. The first one is that if you personalize even a little bit, you immediately insert that human to human. You break down some barriers. You are able to have a different kind of a conversation because you disarm all the, no salespeople allowed immediate conditioned reaction that the buyer might have. So you have to, of course, as you're personalizing, you go out online, maybe you find something about the company's mission and values, or you find something out about the individual. But I know what you're thinking. How do I have time to do all of that for everybody that I call on?
Correct.
So I guess the second tip I'd insert here, it goes hand in hand with this one, is that it's Deb's first rule of selling. It's a formula, E equals O. And that just stands for effort equals opportunity. You have to know how big the opportunity is. In your mind, how much can you really help this person? How likely is it that they are going to have a need for your product? And if you've had some of those thoughts, like I know they already have a contract with someone else, maybe that represents a little less opportunity. So you put a little less effort into it on the front end. But as the opportunity grows, your effort toward it would grow in an equivalent measure.
So personalized, like this on E equals O. I think you said you have 3. What's your third one?
So on top of that, if you can in any way, shape, or form ask a question that breaks the ice, a question that other people aren't asking them, a question that makes them think, a question that really takes this up to the next level. It's not just a salesperson. It's not just a product pitch. It's got value all by itself because you made me think. So that's also different from what most salespeople do. In the first 15 seconds of a call, it's rare for someone to ask a question, and that changes everything.
So it's funny you said that. I've shared this story on our podcast before, but I'll share it here if you don't listen to it, which is on a related note. My son is in his 20s, and he's found himself a young lady who he quite fancies, and they've been dating for a very time. And recently he got to meet the mother for the first time. And he was, my son is quite engaging, but because this lady means a lot to him, he really wanted to impress the mother. And he called me up for one of those rare moments in time where he asked for his father for advice. And the answer I gave him was, what you want to do is you want to let the relationship, simmer a little bit and get comfortable and build trust and build rapport. And the easiest thing to do there is ask questions. What do you do for a living? How do you like that? How long have you been doing that? What's the biggest thing? How long is your day? And then along the way, they're going to give you interesting answers that you can bounce off of. In the end, this is no different than how we effectively are doing discovery, except in discovery, you might follow a framework, make sure you guide the conversation to get all the information you want. But it's not linear. You should bounce. And by asking the questions, they do a lot of talking and they open up and their guard drops. So that worked out well for him. The potential future mother-in-law likes him. We're good. But I love that thing. Ask a question. Fee, let me throw it over to you. What are some of the things you've seen work well, either personally or with your colleagues, to overcome phone calling fears?
I think, off the back of what you've both said, actually, questions and listening and adapting to each individual prospect, be that in your tone of voice or how quickly you insert that question and how open they are to sharing, how much you probe. It's got to be different for every individual prospect that you are engaged with on the phone. And that goes back to both the human aspect and also, sales is a relationship business. As you said, Daryl, it's about building that trust. You are representing whatever you're selling, and you've got to get that across. They have to want to buy from you, rather, in order to get them across that line. So I think listening and adapting. Don't be scared of silences. Which
love that advice. Yes.
I used to be very scared of, and you just keep talking and just faster and faster, and it's more intense and you're making less sense. And now I'm rhyming, apparently.
We were freestyling, so.
Yeah, there we go. It's all in keeping. But yeah, don't be afraid, because they're thinking. We've got them on the spot. We've interrupted their day and you've asked them a question. Well, if you want a good answer, give them a moment to think about it, I think. So I think they're pretty good ones.
Let me drill down on your 2 points. Your 2 points to remind the audience was adapting to the prospects and don't be afraid of silence. So I'll have a comment I'll share to you about the silence thing. In fact, silence, while initially feels awkward, let me share something with you folks listening or watching. silence is a superpower. If you just let the silence hang, ask a question and just shush, don't say anything, and just let it hang. They will eventually jump in and fill it. They will be compelled to fill it. It's a human behavior, and they will actually open up. You can use silence to your benefit to get that conversation going. So it's kind of two-part. Deb said, ask a question. And then, Fee said, don't be afraid of silence. Put those together, right? So not just any one of these tactics. You can use them in tandem. That's huge. Now, Fiona, you talked about adapting to the prospects. So I agree with you. You adapting, Deb adapting in the way the individual was saying, oh my gosh, you're stalking me, and it's conspiracy theories, are both really good examples. But I guess, what if you're freaking out? What if you're scared? How do you tell someone to adapt when they're nervous and they think they're going to screw up, or they may freeze in the moment and not know what to say? Is there any kind of coaching or advice you can give them on how to be prepared to adapt?
I think that having a process and having systems and accountability that support you through your sales process, like scripting and such, that's obviously the basis for supporting someone that's feeling unconfident in that moment, and they can, reflect back onto that script. And when I say adapt, I mean adapt that. You don't want to read it word for word if you have a script, but it's really helpful as a basis. And for those moments where you might panic and you go, God, where was I? What am I meant to be talking about next? And the accountability. And I think, listening back to your calls, and I think retrospectively, any conversation we have, if we listen back to it, we would pick apart and pick out bits that we could have done better. So I think, rendering yourself accountable to yourself, and not just your management, because you want to do good for you at the end of the day and be proud of what you're doing. I think it's important.
You just dropped a little secret bomb there, Fee, which was listen to your calls. And Deb, I'd love to know your knowledge on this. Your sights on this, because it's true. When you listen to yourself, maybe you screwed that call up, and you can choose to get flustered and go, I suck at this. Or you listen to the call, play it back, and you go, oh, I see where I went off, or now I know how to handle this. In the calm, patient, moment where there's no one on the phone, you're just listening to yourself, and you can actually say, next time I can do this, or next time I can do that. The whole idea of listening to yourself, like athletes watch game tapes, same thing. That's huge. Deb, I'm curious, do you see that much with your clients when they start to listen to themselves, that the next subsequent time they handle that same situation much better with more confidence?
There's so much self-awareness that comes. I've had people say things like, wow, I never knew that I said that phrase so often, that phrase was having said that, and they were putting it before almost every sentence. Sometimes I even give people an assignment. If there's a lot of fear, or if they're really not feeling that they can do it, I say, look, here's the assignment. I just want you to make 20 terrible phone calls, record them. We're going to listen to them later. I just need some new fodder for my sales training. So you're going to give me the worst case that I can play back for people. And, it's a permission. Okay, I'm just going to make terrible phone calls, and we'll get over it and we'll move on.
And I love, Fee's laughing right now. I said, this is something, there's a story there, Fee. Share with us. Why are you laughing?
Oh, no, I'm laughing at the horrible thought of having to do that. It's petrifying. It's like asking me to queue jump. I'm British. I can't do that.
Yes.
But no, it goes against, as you said, Deb, wanting to do your best to do your worst. Scary.
Yeah. And most people will, because they now have permission to do a terrible job, they'll find out that they can do a much better job than they thought.
And this goes back to, again, when we opened it up in this section, which was how do you overcome your fears? Often it's you actually confront and do that worst case scenario that's in your head. You put yourself in a crowded space, touch that snake who is freaking you out, whatever it might be your fear is. And I'm laughing at Fee. I'm just looking, I would never jump the queue or butt in front of, the line, so to speak, but do it. And then all of a sudden you've done it. Now, what's the worst that could happen, right? So I've got a few more to add, and then we'll go over the list that we've come up with here. One of the things I talked about already, and I'll say this again, is do your homework. In other words, know your product. So don't let the product or the service that you have be the reason why you are, I guess, hesitant to do the cold calling in case they ask you something you don't know. Find a buddy in your company who will walk you through the tools, ask the questions, play with it, invest the time to really understand the value proposition. And part of doing your homework also means that you understand and you learn about your target consumer. So you really understand the life they're living, the pain, the challenges they have. That may mean when you talk to people, you ask them those questions. Maybe there's a bus. They don't have a need for your service. Nothing stopping you. Say, hey, can I ask you a question? How do you like your job? What is it you do? Is that product working for you? Why does it make your life better? Yeah, you didn't buy mine, you bought the competition's, but just help me understand. So, be selfish and ask questions and have people coach you and educate you on what you sell and on who your consumer is so that those issues, those insecurities go away. The next thing is, I'm a big believer, you've heard me do a little bit of name dropping today of people that I follow and who I get a lot of advice from is, and Deb is another example of that, which is watch the pros. All right. There's a lot to be said. You don't have to do what the pros do, but when you see how they handle certain things, you may go, well, I don't like that person's response, but I like how that person handled the situation. That's more like me. I'm comfortable with that. And I wouldn't have thought of that approach, but I next time that comes up, I'm going to try that approach. That's not unlike listening to your own calls. In this case, though, you're listening to the pro. And there's a lot of people online at any one point in time on YouTube or on LinkedIn who are doing that role modeling, and they're doing the scenario and the role playing, and you can watch how they handle it. So listen, watch the pros. The other thing you do is there's going to be probably a pro in your company. To Deb's point, do some role playing and learn from them. That's big. A lot of people have fears because they're not in control. Well, let's fix that. Build a plan. If you're a control freak, have a plan. Whether it's a decision tree, a script, whatever it might be, whatever you need to do to feel confident so you're prepared. Now, every plan goes out the window as soon as it gets implemented. Just know that. And our ladies are smiling because they've lived that firsthand. But if you've got a plan, at least you're feeling a little more confident going into that call. As Deb has talked about, practice. Just practice. Practice good scenarios, bad scenarios, any scenario. Practice, practice, practice. Sometimes that means you're going to say, I want to target my C quality leads because I know they're not going to buy. But I'm going to get a chance to practice before I get to my B's or my A's, as an example. I could practice with coworkers. Practice. Finally, learn to embrace the objections. How do you respond? Again, learn from your colleagues, learn from your clients, your actual customers. Because remember, even though you're out generating new business, you probably have customers. You can call the customer up and say, if I asked you this and you gave me that objection, how would I respond to that objection? They're a wealth of knowledge. So embrace the objection. So with that, I'm going to recap here in the essence of time. What I've heard, how do we overcome our phone call fears? Deb's talked about having the right mindset and the right attitudes, about how you just say, I'm offering a kick-ass product here, and if they reject it, it's not a rejection to me, it's a rejection of my product. That's cool. Personalize it. It disarms them. E equals O. The bigger the effort, the bigger the opportunity, the bigger the effort. So you make a judgment call on that. Ask questions. Break the ice. Make them think. Fiona talks about adapting to prospects. It could be your tone of voice, but you adapt. Don't be scared of silence. It's a secret weapon. Listen to your calls and just continually improve. And I've talked about homework, watch the pros, build a plan, practice, and embrace the objections. So that's, in a nutshell, how we're going to say to you today how to overcome phone call fears. Deb, anything else we need to add to this discussion that we haven't covered off?
We talked a little bit about gatekeepers, and I mentioned asking questions that make people think. Let me just give away a question. And this comes out of research done for Discover Questions, Get You Connected, which was all fields of sales. But it's a great question. I've taught it to a lot of teams. They really like it. When you get a receptionist or a gatekeeper on the phone and you don't know how to break through, just ask what you want to know. what you want to know, and you can just ask is, hey, tell me something. When salespeople call you, how do you decide which ones to send through to your boss?
I love it.
Just ask.
And
it opens up great conversations.
And that's exactly what I was talking about there. Ask these people to get that knowledge. Just ask. Exactly. Don't be hung up on egos or anything else. Just ask. Fiona, anything else we should have covered or we should have mentioned based on your experience firsthand of how to overcome the fear of cold calling?
I think just believe in it. Cold calling does still work. It is the easiest way to connect to humans and get what you've got to sell across to someone. And asking those questions, as Deb said, solving those problems and listening are going to lead to that.
I love it. All right. So let's bring up a recap slide here. You've been talking to Deb Calvert. She is with People First Productivity Solutions. As you can see, she's a wealth of knowledge, and she's pretty good at what she does. Check out the company. If you have any questions, just give her an email. Her email's right there. Follow her on LinkedIn. She is cool. Let me tell you that one. Fiona Tibble, VanillaSoft rockstar. She's amazing. Her email's right there. Fiona Tibble at VanillaSoft.com. She'd love to talk to you. And hey, if you want to buy something, just sell you something too. Go VanillaSoft. And of course, my name is Daryl Prell. We do this all the time. Lots of content with the industry's biggest and brightest, like these ladies here. Ladies, thank you for joining me today. Folks, if you enjoyed this, there's more at the VanillaSoft website, VanillaSoft.com. And if you're looking for a killer sales engagement solution, check out VanillaSoft.com/free-trial. My name's Daryl Prell. I'm with VanillaSoft. This is about not getting hung up on your phone call fears. We wish you a wonderfully scary Halloween. Take care. Bye-bye.